Hello, everybody. Greetings to you. Hope you all had a wonderful Sunday. And for our devotion this morning, I have a verse from Psalm 4, the very first verse. And the verse reads like this: Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. This is a very powerful verse because the psalmist was in distress and he wanted to be heard. He wanted his prayer to be heard by God. 2 times he says that in that verse, hear me and hear my prayer. And in between, the psalmist recognizes something that God did to him in his distress. And what did God do to him? He said, God, you have enlarged me in my distress. Sometimes there are times when we can feel like we are very small, shrunk. Sometimes we feel we are in a very low points in life, at a very low spiritual energy level. And that in those times we also have a prayer to God, and we desperately want God to hear our prayer. And God does hear our prayer. And we seek God to deliver us from that distress, and God will deliver us. But the psalmist, what he also recognized in that time of distress that he went through was that God enlarged him. Now, how can a believer be enlarged in a time of distress? I believe even before the distress is over, or there is a deliverance from distress, or the situation is changed, God gives us a revelation of Himself, or a rhema about who He is to us in the situation. That becomes the reason for our enlargement. Maybe our thinking is affected, our feelings are affected a certain way. Maybe the reason for the distress could still be there, whatever that reason may be, whether it's a physical phenomena or something else, but we are enlarged in that distress. And this comes through God revealing Himself to us. And this is that personal note we can take with us in this devotion. Deliverance is of God. God hears our prayer, but we don't want to miss out on who God reveals Himself to be toward us in that. And that is a great way of knowing Him. That personal illumination of God's nature and character to us, that personal intimacy of God to us, is something that we can treasure forever in our life. And it is something that will remain with us forever. Then in Psalm 18, verse 19, Psalm 18, verse 36, King David said, You have enlarged my steps under me, that my feet did not slip. So in Psalm 4 verse 1, the psalmist said, You have enlarged me. In Psalm 18 verse 36, the psalmist says, You have enlarged my steps under me, that my feet did not slip. So, our steps being enlarged under us has to do with God giving us a lot of space to grow. He is not done with us because of our mistakes, because of our lack of understanding, because of our failures, etc. But He has enlarged our steps under us, and He gives us a lot of space to grow, to get to know Him. And He also gives us opportunities. Maybe we misuse opportunities, or we have misused opportunities that we had before, which God brought to us. And now God is not telling us, you are done, no more, I'm done with you. No. He gives us space to grow, and He continues to give us opportunities to grow. And then in Psalm 73, the psalmist said in verse 2, "But as for me, my feet were almost gone, my steps had well nigh slipped." In Psalm 73 and verse 2. So the psalmist needed an enlargement because the psalmist was confused in the first part of that psalm. But then he comes into the sanctuary of God and he begins to recognize things. And then the latter part of the psalm, from verse 17 onwards, Psalm 73, we see that the psalmist is confirmed at the end. Confused in the beginning, but confirmed in the end. And that is another way God enlarges us. Maybe by allowing things in a way that may cause confusion to us, or that may result in conflict in our lives. There could be confusion or conflict that we could be faced with. But in it, we are not done. In it, God sees to it that we are being enlarged as He confirms us with His presence, with His rest, with the understanding He gives us in the middle of that confusion, in the middle of that conflict. So God is constantly in the process of enlarging His people. Yes, in distress, and our prayer is, God, deliver me out of this distress. That's a very good prayer, important prayer. And God hears that, and God will do that. But God is also interested in enlarging His people. He enlarges us by a revelation of Himself, a personal illumination of His promise, or a personal illumination of His attribute, or His nature and character toward us. And we are enlarged in that distress. Then we see that He enlarges our steps under us, where He gives us a lot of space to grow, and He gives us opportunities of faith so that we can grow in Him. And then, in the midst of confusion and conflict, God enlarges us by confirming us in who He is and who we are in Him, and the future and the hope that we have in Him. So even if it's a conflict, God enlarges us by confirming us in amazing ways. That we read about the psalmist in Psalm 23. And then the psalmist could say, "It is good for me to draw near to God. It's good for me to draw near to God." Because he was enlarged. In that confusion he was in, or in that personal conflict he felt that he was in, he got confirmed, which became a way by which he was enlarged, and he was restful and hopeful in God. Amen. So God bless you. Have a wonderful week. We have a Good Friday, Easter season before us, and we can be reflecting on those passages and recognize the distress that Jesus was brought into, that he faced as his days were being numbered toward the cross. But he was at the same time enlarged by his Father. He was enlarged by his Father. Therefore, he could go to the cross without dying in a premature way and finish the work that the Father had sent him to do. Amen. Yes, Jesus in a lot of distress because of what agony that was coming upon him. But the Father kept him. Father fellowshiped with him, communed with him, encouraged him, even in the Garden of Gethsemane, so that he could successfully finish the work that the Father had given him to do. He was enlarged, the Son was preserved in the call. Amen. So God bless you and see you all next week.